Good afternoon to everyone who's joined us on the live stream. Thank you for joining us for the annual CAPER review meeting. Welcome to our performance review of the 2022 Community Development Block Grant and Emergency Solutions Grant funding report. These are our funds that we received from the Department of Housing and Urban Development in 2022. And the purpose of our meeting today is to review our annual report and provide you all with details of the way the city has progressed in meeting our goals set out in the 2021 to 2025 Consolidated Annual Action Plan for our HUD entitlement funding. The presentation today is being streamed and recorded. We are not monitoring the live chat comments, and any official public comments should be submitted directly to city staff, either in person at the end of this meeting, if anyone comes, or through the Engage Lancaster platform, or through phone or email, and we'll provide our contact information at the end of the presentation. So first I want to introduce the staff that is here and offer my gratitude. Craig Walt is our Bureau Chief of Lead Safety and Community Development. Simone Dia is our Community Development Administrator. Bryn McGowan, our Community Development Administrator, and Elise Poi, our Program Administrator. I'm Rebecca Geiser, the Deputy Director for Health, Housing, and Community Development in the Department of Community Planning and Economic Development. Our staff team here has worked to complete the CAPER report for submission to HUD this year and every year as a requirement of our entitlement funding. And they have worked hard all year both to implement the programs, to work with our partners, and collect all of the data for over 20 internal and external CDBG and ESG funded programs. This report is guided by the HUD regulations and is one of our requirements for our grants. And we work together to develop, implement, and evaluate community development programming to address affordable housing, public infrastructure, quality of life, economic development, and homelessness. So thank you to Craig, Elise, Simone, and Bryn. Thank you all for your incredible work, both ongoing throughout the year and also for putting together this report and all of the work that it represents. So thanks for presenting that to us and the public today.
Great. Now Simone will provide us with an overview of the city's HUD-funded community development programs.
Thank you, Bryn. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for this meeting. For those of you who are unfamiliar with the term HUD, let me start by saying the abbreviation HUD stands for the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. HUD is a government agency responsible for establishing national policy and assistance programs related to housing needs. These programs are designed to improve and develop the nation's communities and enforce fair housing laws. The purpose of HUD is to provide housing and community development assistance and to make sure all Americans have access to fair and equal housing. While HUD has oversight over many assistance programs, the ones highlighted in this presentation will include the Emergency Solutions Grant, or ESG, and the Community Development Block Grant, otherwise known as CDBG. So how do we distinguish between the two entitlement programs? The CDBG entitlement program provides annual grants to develop viable urban communities by providing decent housing and suitable living environments, by improving the quality of life for people with low and moderate incomes, and by expanding economic opportunities for individuals and households with the same level of income. Whereas the ESG entitlement program offers annual grant allocations to support individuals and families who are homeless or at risk of homelessness quickly regain access to permanent housing. The eligible activities for ESG includes 5 program components: emergency shelter, street outreach, rapid rehousing, data collection or HMIS, planning and administrative costs up to 7.5%. As for the CARES Act allocation, CV, Congress provided resources for the coronavirus aid, relief, and economic security CARES Act of 2020. These allocations were distributed to states, metropolitan cities, urban counties, and insular areas to prevent, prepare for, and respond to coronavirus. Later in his presentation, my colleague Bryn will provide a high-level overview of the eligible activities supported with CDBG funds. Next slide. So the acronym for the CAPER stands for the Consolidated Annual Performance and Evaluation Report. All recipients with HUD funding are required to submit a CAPER to HUD annually outlining the accomplishments and progress made while utilizing CDBG and ESG funds. Next, you'll hear from Bryn on ways to access our 2022 CAPER report.
So there are a variety of ways to access the city's 2022 CAPER report. A hard copy version is available here at City Hall, and it's also available on the city's website at the URL on the screen. You could also go to the city's website, www.cityoflancasterpa.gov, choose CityGov, scroll to Department of Community Planning and Economic Development, choose the Office of Lead Safety and Community Development, and choose Documents and Resources at the bottom of the page. There you can find the 2022 draft CAPER. On the handouts provided in person here, we also have a QR code that you can scan to directly access the CAPER. And the city will be accepting public comments on its draft CAPER through March 26, 2023. So you have the opportunity to submit public comments on our 2022 CAPER using a variety of mechanisms. You can submit public comments in person at the end of the presentation through the Engage Lancaster platform at the URL on the screen, or via phone or email to the community development staff listed here. And once again, the deadline for public comments is March 26, 2023. So now I just want to provide some context on how the city develops and designs its community development programming supported by its CDBG and ESG grants. The city administers CDBG and ESG grant funds on a 5-year consolidated planning cycle, as Rebecca mentioned earlier. The current plan runs from 2021 to 2025, with 2022 being the second year of our current cycle. HUD requires that all of our programming supported by these grants is designed and implemented through a 5-year goal-oriented framework. As part of our strategic planning process for our current plan cycle, the city identified 5 primary goals through a community needs assessment that it is currently working to support with its annual ESG and CDBG funding. They are Goal 1, to maintain affordable, good quality housing. Goal 2, to increase affordable housing opportunities. Goal 3, to promote neighborhood quality of life. Goal 4, to expand economic opportunities. And Goal 5, to support homeless services. The city uses these goals to guide and, to guide the design and implementation of its community development portfolio. And our presentation will provide an overview of how we utilized ESG and CDBG entitlement and CV funding allocations in 2022 to support these goals. Now I will turn the presentation over to Simone, who will provide additional information about the city's ESG program, in addition to details regarding its 2022 accomplishments.
Thank you, Bryn. So as mentioned earlier, there are 5 eligible program components of ESG as depicted on the screen. The purpose of funding these components are to engage homeless individuals and families living on the street, operate and improve the number and quality of emergency shelters for homeless individuals and families, provide essential services to shelter residents, rapidly rehouse homeless individuals and families, prevent families and individuals from becoming homeless in the first place, and up to 7.5% of a recipient's allocation can be used for administrative costs. Next slide. The city intentionally fosters relationships with community partners. Annually, we collaborate with the Office for the Coalition, Lancaster County Housing and Redevelopment Authority, and the United Way in a joint funding relationship. The purpose of these partnerships are to prevent duplication of funding for the same or similar services and to streamline the joint funding application process. The goals of the Alliance are intended to meet community needs and gaps, assign only the funds needed for respective projects, and simplify the application and match process. Next slide. While the city did not receive ESG entitlement for fiscal year 22, there were activities implemented in the 2022 program year supported by remaining fiscal year 21 ESG entitlement funds. These funds sponsored programming with the YWCA tenfold and covered administrative costs. As a side note, we are proud of our collaborations with community providers because while we anticipated serving 40 households with rapid rehousing services, we are pleased to report that we exceeded this goal by serving 57 households, a 125% increase in the projected benchmark. Individuals and families who received rapid rehousing support included short-term and medium-term tenant-based rental assistance and other supportive services, and were likely averted from experiencing the crisis of homelessness. Next slide. Our community providers or subrecipients who received ESG entitlement funds utilized these monies toward emergency shelter at $44,000, rapid rehousing at $43,315, and outreach support at $16,500. The city was also allocated 7.5% or $10,925 for planning and administrative costs. Next slide. The beneficiaries of these services are depicted quantitatively in this slide. In 2022, 454 individuals received services across all activities: emergency shelter, rapid rehousing, and outreach. Respectively, 33% or 300 persons identified as white, 12% as Black African American, 3% as multiple race, 2% not identified, and less than 1% of individuals identified as Asian, Native Hawaiian, or American Indian. Of that number, 69% of the participants were non-Hispanic, 28% Hispanic, and 3% were unidentifiable. At this time, I'm turning the mic over to Bryn, who will describe the CDBG program performance and accomplishments.
Thank you, Simone. Hello again, everyone. I'm delighted to share with you some additional details about the city's Community Development Block Grant Program, or CDBG for short, and how the city utilized its CDBG funding in 2022 to further its community development goals. Just to review, the city is currently working with two different versions of the CDBG grant funding. The first version, called CDBG Entitlement, is an annual allocation the city receives from HUD with the primary goal of developing vibrant urban communities, improving the quality of life for all residents through facilitating the creation of suitable living environments, and generating improved economic opportunities. In order to promote communal equity, access, and opportunity for the city's socioeconomically disadvantaged residents, CDBG is primarily oriented towards benefiting residents with very low, and moderate incomes. Historically, the city receives around $1.5 to $1.7 million from HUD annually to help further its community development goals related to housing, quality of life, and economic development. The city is also working with an allocation of CDBG from the CARES Act, as previously stated. The main focus of these funds is to equip the city to help prevent, prepare for, and respond to the adverse community impacts of the coronavirus pandemic. So the city can utilize CDBG funding to fund programs within 5 main eligible activity areas. They are affordable housing preservation activities, public facilities and improvements, public services, economic development, and the city can also utilize this funding to help support its planning and administration costs of the program. So the city designs, implements, and funds activities both internally and externally with community partners within each of these categories to help support its community development goals. So the city partners with community organizations to further these goals within the eligible activity areas. In 2022, we partnered with a diverse array of community social service providers to help us deliver critical community programs related to the provision of fair and affordable housing, crime reduction and social work, COVID-19 outreach mitigation and education, homelessness, hygiene and health support, and economic development. So turning now to our 2022 expenditures, the city expended around a total of $1.8 million in CDBG monies in 2022. We spent about $1.55 million of that in CDBG entitlement and $340,000 of that in the CDBG CV or CARES Act funding geared towards COVID-19. This next slide presents a breakdown of how both the CDBG entitlement and CV monies were spent to further the city's community development goals. From this, we can see that a large portion of both funding sources was used to maintain affordable, good quality housing. Around 65% of our entitlement funding went towards this goal, whereas 44% of our CARES Act CV funding went towards that goal. Around 17% of our entitlement funding was dedicated to furthering neighborhood quality of life, with 3% dedicated to increasing affordable housing opportunities, 3% spent on expanding economic opportunities, and the remaining 12% was expended on internal planning and administration costs. While the majority of the CV funding, around 52%, was spent to promote neighborhood quality of life, and the remaining 4% went towards expanding economic opportunities. The handout provided, which will also be posted to our website, also includes a breakdown of our spending by eligible activity area. So next up, let's review how the city spent these funds to support programming within each of the goals that we have laid out for our community development programs. So within our maintain affordable, good quality housing goal, the city funded critical repair and lead hazard control programs, as well as proactive housing code enforcement programs with CDBG. Within the Increase Affordable Housing Opportunities goal, the city helped fund some comprehensive planning efforts with the Bureau of Planning. Within the Promote Neighborhood Quality of Life goal, the city implemented programs like the Place-Based Streetscape Improvement Program with our DPW, the Fair Housing Services Program with Tenfold, our Health and Housing Social Worker Program with the Bureau of Health, the Department of Neighborhood Engagement Program Manager, the Police Social Worker Program in connection with the Bureau of Police. We funded a downtown outreach specialist for COVID-19 support with the Lancaster City Alliance. We also funded a city health worker for COVID-19 support with Lancaster General, as well as a Refresh Lancaster project that provided mobile hygiene unit support services with Lancaster EMS. Within our Expand Economic Opportunities goal, the city funded a microenterprise small business development program for city residents with assets, and we also funded some building code support internally. The city also expended funding for planning administration for its HUD program administration costs. Next, let's focus on some high-level outcomes that were collectively achieved by our CDBG activities in 2022. So city CDBG projects provided benefit to 7,131 Lancaster City residents in 2022. Of that total, 976 households were provided with direct benefit through the city's critical repair and lead hazard reduction programs, which you'll hear about later, the city's health and housing social worker support, the Refresh Lancaster services from Lancaster EMS, and the microenterprise development education from Assets, and the Fair Housing Services program provided with Tenfold. Of that total, 550 households were provided with direct affordable housing benefit, and approximately 92% of the city residents directly supported with our CDBG assisted programs were of low and moderate income. This demonstrates the city's commitment to promoting service provision to majority low and moderate income residents in alignment with CDBG's overarching philosophical principles. Finally, this slide depicts the racial, ethnic, and income demographics of city residents who received direct benefit program support from our 2022 CDBG programming. 42% of the beneficiaries served identified as white, 29% identified as other multiracial, 24% identified as Black African American, 2% identified as Asian, 1% identified as Black African American and white, and less than 1% identified as American Indian, Alaskan Native, and Black African American, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander, and American Indian, Alaskan Native. Of that, 61% were non-Hispanic, 39% were Hispanic, and finally, in 2022, our CDBG programming supported a majority of low and moderate income residents and households, with 58% being of extremely low income, 24% being of low income, and 10% being of moderate income. Next up, we would like to highlight the 2022 accomplishments of the city's critical repair and lead hazard control programs, which will be shared by Program Administrator Elise Poi.
All right, thank you, Bryn. So CDBG supports 2 housing programs for the Office of Lead Safety and Community Development to help maintain affordable, good quality housing. One of it is the Critical Repair Program, the other is the Lead Hazard Control Program. The Critical Repair Program, which is fully funded by CDBG, provides financial assistance to owner-occupied families at or below 80% of HUD's family income guidelines for emergency-type repairs that include roof replacements, water heaters, furnaces, electrical hazards, plumbing, and broken sewer pipes. The Lead Hazard Control Program, which is partially funded by CDBG, helps qualified homeowners, landlords, renters reduce risks related to lead paint exposure. The program targets low to moderate income households with children living or visiting under the age of 6 in homes built prior to 1978. Lead remediation work may include paint stabilization, replacement of windows and doors. So this next slide shows the funds that were spent in 2022 for critical repair and lead hazard control program. So about $587,713 was spent. 33 projects went through the critical repair program using CDBG and CDBG CV funds, and 36% of the funds were used to support the lead hazard control program in 34 units. This isn't represented in the CAPER, but I wanted to highlight how CDBG funds help support the lead hazard control program. So in 2022, about $804,356 was spent to address lead paint hazards in 54 units. $214,594 of those funds were CDBG to help leverage the HUD grant. $559,500 were HUD funds, and the remaining $30,242 were landlord contributions towards the projects. So this next slide shows the demographic information for 2022. 62 households received assistance through the programs. 56% identified as other multiracial, 16% as Black African American, and 15% identified as white. Less than 1% of applicants who received assistance identified as American Indian, Alaskan Native and Black, Black African American and white, and Asian. Of those numbers, 60% of the applicants were Hispanic and 37% was non-Hispanic. So both programs requires that the household is low and moderate income, which 47% of the household was extremely low income, 35% was low income, and 18% was moderate income. So this wraps up our presentation, and I'll bring it over to Bryn.
Thank you, Elise. Now we will open the floor for those people in attendance today for a public comment opportunity. If you have any public comments about the city's draft 2022 CAPER, we ask that you please come to the podium or find a microphone so it can be captured in the recording. And we would like you to please state your name and where you live in the city and keep your comments to 30 minutes maximum, trying to focus on some 3 minutes maximum, not 30. Trying to focus on feedback also related to unmet needs or gaps in your community. Oh my. My computer just lost battery.
Yeah, I don't think I need it. In follow-up to what Bryn was saying, the focus of your question should pertain to unmet needs or gaps that exist in your community, what it is that you would like to see prioritized as a funding component, what feedback you have regarding the delivery and accessibility of programming and services. These comments can be made today at the conclusion of this presentation, or you may contact any of the CPED staff listed on the screen below. So we thank you for coming, and we are at the end of the closure of this presentation, and we are open to public comment at this time. Thank you.